Welcome to the 2006 Honda Accord starter rebuild. I'm not sure how far these instructions will send you into the other models, but this will definitely help you with the 06 EX model. I will start dismantling this thing and rebuild it, but here are the parts you will need. The first one to replace is the brush kit, which is this thing right here, and it will cost you around $30, and it's an official OEM Honda part. There are other third-party brush kits that you can get, but I like to stick with the OEM stuff. Here's the part number below for your reference. Here's the plunger kit. It should come with the washer inside, the plunger rod, and 3 springs. The set will cost you around $10. It's an official part also, and here is the part number listed below as well. Okay, we will begin by using a 5/16 socket and remove the back. Once the bolts are undone, remove the rear bracket unit and the yoke assembly cover, and inside you will see the armature assembly, as well as a bunch of black dust. And this is from the brushes being worn out, and as you can see here, there's quite a bit. We will also want to degrease some of these parts later on. After removing the yoke assembly cover, you can see more of the armature inside the cover, as well as the old brush assembly, and in mine the brushes are pretty worn down. Next we will remove the armature from within the yoke assembly cover. Inside the cover are a bunch of magnets. You will have to push or pull on it to get it out. Here's the armature. We will clean this up, and you will want to get yourself a multimeter, as we will test the armature later on to make sure this is still working. Next we will want to remove the rubber cover around the old brush set. It's tucked into some grooves and will take a bit of work breaking it free. After that, remove this metal washer that's holding the spring down underneath it. Don't worry about damaging it because the new brush set will have a replacement. Remove the copper washer as well, as this will also be replaced. Take out these planetary gears and the housing that they sit in. If yours is damaged, you'll need to replace that also. Mine looks to be alright, so I'll just clean mine and reuse it. It may take some prying, but remove this plastic gear housing. Notice that underneath the plastic housing you will find your plunger set. Remove this also if yours needs to be replaced. Next thing we will do is clean up this armature. Just wipe everything down with the rag first. Notice here this needs to be cleaned up. This is what the brushes rub against and produce that black dust inside over time as they wear down. I will use 220 grit sandpaper. The manual suggests 500, but I think this will be fine. After sanding it, take a razor blade or something similar and scrape out the buildup in between each groove. Okay, now that we've got the armature cleaned up, the next thing we're going to do is do a continuity test. You have to do this in between each segment. I'm using this cheap Harbor Freight multimeter, and to do a continuity test, you're going to switch this dial to this setting right here. On this one, I found a little spot that will be my marker to tell me when I've gone all the way around it. So you just touch one segment right here, and then the other one, and you should see something of the effect of like 001. Then you go to the next one like this and touch it. It should say it has continuity 002, 001, something of that effect. Now if you don't have continuity, it should stay right here, just like this at 1. So 002, so this has continuity. So then you'll move over to the next one. Touch each one next to each other, 001. Go to the next one, or the next two, 001, 002, 001. Okay, I've made a complete pass of all the segments. Now the next part we want to test is to make sure that there is no continuity between the core, which is this right here, and each segment. So this needs to stay at 1. Okay? And then you want to make sure that there is no continuity between the segments and the shaft right here. So it should stay at 1. After we do this armature, the next step is, well, you don't have to do this, but I'm going to go ahead and just clean inside of here. I'm not going to use any degreaser in there because I don't want to get any degreaser up inside of the up way in here where there's lubricants that I can't get to. I don't want to wash any of that out. Alright, that looks pretty good for now. Set that aside, and I am going to clean out this plastic housing, as well as all of these gears. And for these, I will use a degreaser. So go ahead and clean that up. I will use a bowl like this, spray some degreaser in there, and let it set for about 15 minutes and wash it out. Okay, after you've cleaned everything out, which includes these planetary gears right here, this housing, this end cap, you want to clean the outside of that and definitely inside like before, but don't use any grease in here because if there's any bearings in here in the degreaser, you won't be able to get it open to be able to re-grease them. And you want to clean this housing too, inside and out. And I didn't use degreaser on there either. I just washed it out with water and dried it. Used a spray can. Okay, we're going to start assembling this thing. I already did the lubing off camera so that it won't take as much time, but you want to re-lube all of these parts that are going to be assembled, and I used brake and caliper grease. I like that it says on here that this won't damage rubber or plastic components, freeze, melt, or wash out. It says to use moly grease, and this has moly grease in it. So the things that we'll need to lube again are this end cap. There's a bushing inside of there that you'll need to lube. Inside of this housing, there are teeth around here that will have some contact, so you'll need to lube the outside of these teeth. There's a bushing inside of this housing that you'll need to lube, as well as the teeth on the inside. I put lube on all of these teeth on the planetary gears. So lube all that, and on the inside right here, there are teeth that you'll need to lube. On your plunger piece here, you'll need to lube the outside of this. And the ring that goes inside of that plunger kit, you'll need to lube the inside of that. Okay, we're going to start assembling this thing now. I assembled this rod to the plunger off camera, but it's really easy. All you got to do is stick it in there just like this, and it does go a certain way. If you want to use your other one for reference, you can, but there's an indent on this rod right here that's got to face to the inside, and then on the other side it's raised a little bit, and that's got to be facing out. So we're going to start with these little springs. You have 3 springs that come with this little plunger kit, and they're going to sit on the inside of this housing, right inside here. There are 3 little stations where these springs will sit. One here, and one here. And then when we put them springs in here, this has to sit on the springs. And if you'll notice, this is raised up just slightly. These little springs are going to sit on each one just like this on the inside. And you got to make sure that they are sitting just like that on the raised portion of these 3 contact points. We'll start by putting the springs in. And I dropped one down in there. So, first one, second one, third one. Okay. Then we're going to install the ring that goes inside the plunger next. Make sure you get the thicker portion of the ring down first. If you get it backwards, then when you try to put this in, the spring will push it back out and it won't rest on these 3 little springs. And don't try to force it in there when you put this on top. So put this fatter portion of the ring inside first, and you slide that over the top like so. And then we will put this plunger piece down over that. And remember again, the springs, they've got to contact those little raised portions. And it might take a little bit of time to make sure you get it right, but you do want to make sure these springs are seated correctly. You may even be able to put a little bit of something sticky on the springs and put them on this first and then put that in with the springs. It might help a little bit better because it gets kind of dark in there. And I'm already not in that good of light anyways. I mean, I'm in my kitchen here on the table, so they're not exactly the best shop lights. Alright, so it sounds like, or it looks like these are seated correctly. Next, we will put our planetary gear housing on. Like so. We will put our gears inside of this housing. Okay, and here's our brush set. If you'll notice, there are springs right here, and we'll need to push those down later on. But what these springs do is when you push these down, they extend into these little pads. They look kind of like brake pads, and the springs push those in so that they make contact with this here. So all of them, the springs will close those in so that they can rest around this here. So let's see if I can show you on the old one. So here's what the spring looks like. So they're compressed, right? And once you push them down, so they're in here just like this. You can see the example there. And then when you push them down all the way until they bottom out. All the way down to the bottom there. And then they'll push on this little pad. This little brush pad. And on here, you probably can't see on camera. Well, let's see if I can pry one out. The reason why we had trouble starting this vehicle is because this pad is so worn down right here. It's even kind of off. It was wearing off center. So it wore all the way down to the wire on this. It'll just slide on just like this. Next, you'll have this little copper ring right here. One side is smooth and one side is a little bit rough. You want to put the rough side down first over the top. This spring right here that came with it will go over the top of that. And then this washer will go down over the top of that and secure that spring tight and the little copper washer. Also, you've got to make sure that you install this washer the correct way. If for some reason you screw the washer up, which I hope I don't do, then the kits come with an extra one, thank goodness. I found that it's easier to just put your socket over the top of it once you get it on there. And this is a 5/16. Just put it over the top and just push down, because it'll have even pressure around that disc. Because if you bend it, well, you've either got to bend it back to shape or use your extra one there. But if you use something like this and just push down, it gives it even pressure and it just seats right down over the top. Okay, I'm going to show you guys something real quick. Let's say, for instance, that you are putting this spring on down here with this metal disc that you're supposed to slide over the top, and you've done a pretty terrible job at it and end up kind of marring the groove right here with which this sits on, or you end up bending this and having to take it back off and put it back on. If you do that and you install it that way, you run the risk of this little disc popping off the top, and your car's not going to start, and you're going to have to take everything apart again and either buy a new replacement part or figure something else out. So if you're not confident in your work right here, then what you can do is get some of this quick weld stuff. And this has a pretty quick set time. There's another type you can use which takes about 4 to 6 hours to set. This has a lot less working time, so you're going to have to be quick. This is about 4 to 6 minutes. So what you'll do is you'll put a 50-50 mix in here and you mix it up, and then I'll do it here just so you can see what I'm doing. And then you're going to cover the top of this. Just put a dome of this quick set epoxy on top of there. Just cover the entire thing, and that will keep this metal disc situated, and it's strong enough. It has a 2000 plus psi, so that this little disc won't pop off as you're going down the road. So I'll go ahead and mix this up real quick, and then I will put this on and you can see what I mean. And you got to mix this stuff up pretty good. Make sure it's all evenly done. It'll set in 4 to 6 minutes, but it'll take about 2 hours to get to the PSI that it's intended for. I like this quick set stuff for something like this because if you've kind of fouled up that metal disc, you run the risk of that spring popping the thing off during the other longer setting time stuff. So you gotta kind of have to work quick. That's probably good enough. And then what you'll do is just drape this over the top. And this is not going to interfere with the function of the starter and whatsoever. Okay, just like that. So in about 10 minutes that'll dry, or I mean that'll set to just like that. It's not going to run or anything, and then you'll be able to install this knowing that that little disc isn't going to pop off if you've done something incorrect that you're not confident in. And that should be it, guys. We're going to install your core right here. And you may need to move the brush wires out of the way to get it seated correctly. You have to wiggle it in. These pads are in the way. Right here. So you may have to kind of flex them a little bit, push them back down in there. Again, these springs will push them back out so that they grab the contacts. Okay. After this piece is installed, as you can see, this thing turns like this, and the pads on all four corners rub against that as this thing turns, and that's why you see all that dust in there. It looks like brake pad dust. Okay, next is we're going to push these springs down in there. So you want to push them all the way down until they bottom out, and these pads will grip this so that when this rotates they make contact. Just like in that example with the spring before that I showed you. So we're just going to push that down. Probably use a flathead would be better. Once you think you've bottomed them out, go ahead and rotate it and make sure it feels like they're making contact with the core right here. And I feel resistance. Feels like they're pretty good. You can even get a flashlight if you want and look down in there to make sure that the springs will clear that opening once you push it down, so that as the little pads wear down, the springs will push them further in to make more contact. Okay, after you get your core installed, reinstall the housing, this plastic piece. Looks and feels nice and secure. Got good contact inside there. Okay, and here's the part where it kind of gets tricky. Now if you have a vise, go ahead and use it to hold this in place with the vise. And then we're going to install this housing over the top. But it can be difficult because once you do that, since there's a bunch of magnets in here, they're going to want to grab onto this right here, this core, and as you slide it down, this is going to want to go up into the housing. And what'll happen is it'll yank this away from your spring pads right there. And so what you can do is you can get an extension, and as this is in the vise, push down on top of this as you slide the housing through and then over the top. I'm using a 3/8 with a 1/2 inch adapter on it. Otherwise this is going to get sucked up into here, and then what you'll have to do is take the springs out. You'll have to raise the springs back up on here, reinstall this, push the springs back down, and then try it again. Okay, here we are in the garage. I've got my starter in the vise here. Don't tighten this thing super tight to where you're going to end up deforming in here. And don't put your vise on the teeth right here, or this rod. So clamp it down just like you see here. So this is the extension. You want to put this over the top like that, and I'm going to push down as I put this housing over the top so that this armature doesn't get sucked up in and pull away from all these brushes and pads. So as you push down, just like that. Okay, we're back inside. All we have left to do is put the end cap on. and put our bolts back. So this cap also has to go on right. Now these 2 points here have made a rubbing contact on the housing, so it'll kind of give you an idea of where this was before. You just slide it on. Okay, that is our rebuilt starter. You may want to, before you take all this apart, is make marks on here so that you get this cap on in the right spot. But that is how it should look, the finished product. We'll go ahead and reinstall this and see how this starts running. So it should be fine.